So this video is going to be a little bit rough because, well, I wasn't really prepared to make another video this week. However, before I go on vacation, I ended up stumbling upon an article, and I absolutely had to talk to you guys about it. The article is basically about how a bunch of developers feel that they shouldn't be held to the same standards as Baldur's Gate 3 is setting. A lot of people are seeing Baldur's Gate 3 for the first time, they're watching the videos, or some of them actually got to have some hands-on gameplay, and they're sitting there going, man, this is a huge step forward for RPGs and etc., but there's some people that don't want to be held to the same standard that Baldur's Gate 3 is setting right now. And for the smaller developers that hop in on this conversation, I think they are absolutely valid with what they're bringing up. However, things get really interesting when AAA developers also feel like they need to chime in as well. This article comes from Game World Observer. The article is titled, Why Devs Consider Baldur's Gate 3 Anomaly. Not new standard for the RPG genre. It's Rockstar-level nonsense for scope. The article reads, what sparked the debate for Baldur's Gate 3? This all started with a Twitter thread by Strange Scaffold head Xalavier Nelson Jr. I'm glad I said that right this time. The studio head is best known for Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator and the upcoming Max Payne shooter El Paso Elsewhere. He cited several things that separate Baldur's Gate 3 from most RPGs in the market, namely long development cycle that started back in 2017, two previous games, Divinity Original Sin 2 and Divinity Original Sin, worth of tech and institutional knowledge to draw from, successful early access period lasting 3 years that provided Larian with community feedback, bug hunting, and cash flow, a huge team of over 400 developers across 7 studios, the license for one of the largest entertainment IPs out there in Dungeons & Dragons. Reading directly from Nelson's tweet, like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited for the lovely folks at Larian and what they've accomplished with Baldur's Gate 3, but I want to gently, preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism or raise standard to RPGs going forward. This is not a new baseline for RPGs. This is an anomaly. Adding that, trying to reach the same bar without the same experiences or advantages could kill an entire group of studios. Adding on to that, Rebecca Harwick from Grimoire Games added, this whole thread, you can't be appalled by how much big games cost to make, and those lavish productions, the standard by which all these games are judged. I hope Baldur's Gate 3 is a generous, once-in-a-lifetime RPG. I hope no one expects 10 to 20 to 40-person teams to make one. Now, most of the other developers that hopped in on this tweet also shared similar sentiments. However, they were also smaller third-party companies or indie developers, and we don't have those same kind of expectations for them that we would anybody else. We wouldn't look at them and say, well, you need to make games that look and play just like Baldur's Gate 3. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We don't look at a game like Vampire Survivors and expect those guys to turn around and come out with the next Halo or something like that. If anything, we actually expect from those smaller companies to produce less polished games to us that just have more in-depth gameplay or explore a very specific part of gameplay in a much larger scope than most games normally do, and have really simplified game loops that keep us hooked and keep us addicted, like a Vampire Survivors or something like that. Now, what's really interesting about this thread is that, well, it doesn't just end with the third party and the indie developers. No. The AAA developers felt like they should also chime in as well, and oh boy. Insomniac Games design manager Ryan McCabe urged others not to use a singular game to set expectations for everyone that's developing RPGs because it isn't useful and instead foolhardy. Obsidian Entertainment design director Josh Sawyer noted that having the foundation set and the funding to build things on your own terms is invaluable. This is not downplaying the talented work on Baldur's Gate 3, but acknowledging the case is atypical for the games industry. Now, I find these tweets specifically a little bit more interesting. I don't know if this is industry transparency. Are they telling us that, some of these larger studios like Insomniac or Obsidian Games don't actually have any autonomy over the things that they're creating? Or are they telling us that they don't get the amount of funding that they need for some of the projects that they're making? Or are they saying that they do? It's interesting to say that they're jumping in on this conversation and saying that they also don't want to be held to the standard that Baldur's Gate 3 is putting out when they themselves come from companies that have more than enough resources to be able to put out the exact same quality of games as Larian Studios does. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, things get really interesting when Diablo 4 senior designer Chris Balzer also drops in. He says, "You're absolutely right. Even if you look at one of Vink's touchstones, Ultima 7, that's a game that had 12 years of prior games feeding into it. If we were to look at this as a new benchmark, we would need to then focus on creating conditions just like with Tears of the Kingdom." Furthermore, he states, "But people often only look at the fruits of labor and not the labor itself. Same as it ever was, I guess. Same deal with people wondering why there are so few artists painting like Renaissance masters." And now this is where I'm saying to pump the brakes. It's completely fine for some of these smaller companies to hop in, some of these smaller developers to hop in and say, hey, don't hold us to these kind of standards, even though I think it's weird that they even bring it up because I can't imagine people actually doing that to them. But it's a completely different thing when you have Diablo 4 coming into the picture. We're talking about a company that has far more resources than Larian Studio does, far more people working for them, far more just money, experience, everything, far more everything. If we're going to be running by at least his idea of how things should work, well, then that should be the same case for Diablo 4. And Diablo 4 should show this massive evolution of the series from years of experience and all of the other games that's been feeding into it, whether that's Warcraft, StarCraft, Overwatch, whatever. It doesn't matter. But personally, even though I like Diablo 4, it is definitely not that game. It's not that game that has 20 years of other games that are feeding into it. It's not the game that reflects all of this experience learned from prior Diablo titles. Now, like I said before, it is completely fine for some of these other companies to hop in and have their opinion and say, you know, don't hold us to this standard. It's a completely other thing for these AAA companies to come in and try to use this as an excuse. No, because Larian did set the bar. They set the bar for you. AAA games should absolutely be aiming to hit the same mark that Larian Studios does. There's absolutely no excuse for it, especially with the size of some of these companies and how much money they have available to them, how many people they have that are working for them, how long-standing some of their franchises are. There are no excuses whatsoever for them not to be able to compete with games like Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of scope, in terms of depth, in terms of performance. I mean, you look at Larian right now, and they've already come out and said, you know, we don't care about meeting a specific date. We want to make sure that when we release this game, it's going to play at 60 stable on the PlayStation 5. They're taking their time to make sure that the game comes out for the Xbox and it's in perfect working condition when it does, regardless of whatever hiccups or problems that they've had along the way. This is a company that holds itself to a standard, a quality standard that many developers don't anymore. This isn't an excuse for other developers not to be able to meet that. No. Instead, this is an example that they should be trying to follow in the footsteps of. I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I, again, wasn't really planning on putting out another video. I'm going on vacation after this. I'll be back. It'll be a couple more weeks before I get any other videos out. But, yeah. I just wanted to give some light to this. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, subscribe to the channel. If not, that's cool too. Outside of that, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends, and peace.